Hello, welcome to the HR Strategy in the Hot Seat podcast. My name's Anwen Bottois, I'm your host, and I'm the founder of Purple Sky Consulting. I'm a leadership promotion specialist, and I also have a bit of a side hustle where I focus on development of HR leaders. So as the title of the podcast suggests, this is going to be all about HR strategy and how we can help HR professionals to consider the strategic elements of HR in more depth. Now let's get started with this episode. Hi Paula, welcome to the podcast. It's really lovely to have you join us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Excellent. So why don't you do a little introduction for our guests?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Paula Brockwell. I'm a occupational psychologist and the founder of the Employee Experience Project. Basically, in short, that means I'm a bona fide culture nerd.
Ooh, I love the culture nerd. So tell me a little bit more about that then. What are the things that you help your clients with?
Yeah, so really, our business is about supporting clients to see culture less as that endless battle to try and turn everybody's frowns upside down and chase the relentless engagement score. It's more about supporting organisations to really understand what type of behaviour they need in order to drive successful performance in their business and to create the culture that allows that behaviour to thrive naturally. So we're culture strategists, but we also build capability in organisations so that they can manage and influence and cultivate their own culture over time.
That sounds awesome. Fantastic. So we'll give people details of where they can find you a bit later on. But Paula and I have had opportunity to work together on a few things. Well, she's been my boss basically for a few things, which has been lovely.
You say that.
And it's really lovely to get involved in those types of projects where you're hearing a bit about what people are experiencing and kind of going through in terms of their working environments. And it just goes to show how important this type of work is really, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's a lovely job, isn't it? Because ultimately what we are doing is improving the world of work and improving people's experience at work, which is massive in terms of influencing the rest of their lives. But I think what I've certainly learned over the years is that you can't just do it because it's a nice thing to do. You've got to do it to drive performance in the organisation. And that's what I love about how we do it at the Employee Experience Project. We're making it feel relevant and useful to the business rather than just a nice thing to do. So it actually gets traction, which is cool.
It's so not fluffy.
It's really not fluffy. Well, I grew up in Belfast and my dad was a prison officer. My mum was a dinner lady. It was never going to be a nice to have, was it? Let's be honest.
Definitely not. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. So what would you like to put in the HR strategy hot seat today?
For me, it's this first piece that I was talking about in intro and what we do. Really, how do we make culture a lever of performance rather than just this endless chase towards engagement or making people feel slightly less irritated with us at work every day?
I love that it's not about just the little moments of how people are feeling. Actually, it's the bigger sum of the parts, isn't it? And how that impacts on performance of the organisation.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think certainly a lot of the work that we do with HR leaders, I think, let's be honest, I think we've all been indoctrinated with this idea that culture is that well-known saying of culture is how your people feel on a Sunday night. I don't disagree with that, but I think that is about 20% of what culture is and the value that it can deliver. And I think as HR professionals, what we're taught in our training, what's provided by suppliers, etc., all focuses on that feels piece. And it's such a small part of the overall value that we can deliver. I think it's a brilliant conversation to have as HR leaders about what's the true value of this and how do we leverage it in a more strategic way.
Lovely. I really love that. So talk to us, let's unpack some of that in terms of where you see that crossover of culture and performance. Why is it so important to have your culture in a way that supports performance? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think, as I kind of said, I think a lot of people see that definition. What they'll say to us, their initial goal is to build a good culture. And what that means to them is that people feel positive about their business. They feel they feel like committed to it and motivated to do a good job. But I think this piece around linking to performance is the other side of the culture coin, which is that people know what good looks like. They understand what's expected from them, and they're delivering in a way that is in service to the business, not just their everyday experience. So I think particularly post-COVID, but I think it's a general challenge for a lot of businesses, this kind of push towards culture as engagement has meant that a lot of businesses are stuck in this situation where people expect unending perks, experience, flexibility, that their needs to be prioritized over everything. And while they might say they have a good culture, what that actually does is act against what the business needs in terms of working rhythms, flexibility, the critical behaviours that business needs to succeed. So for me, really great culture, yes, thinks about experience. We've got to help people feel connected, happy, healthy, connected enough to do a great job. But the other piece of that is about creating a deal, an expectation, and an environment that allows people to show up in the way that the business needs them to. So there's a balance here for me. Great culture looks after its people, but it creates the conditions where the people look after the business as well and ensure that it succeeds. And there's an imbalance at the moment. I think a lot of businesses are chasing that continual experience, and it's to the detriment of the business getting the behaviours that it needs to really deal with the crazy contextual challenges that lots of businesses are dealing with at the minute. I don't think we need to say the world's gone mad, but it kind of has, hasn't it?
It's totally gone mad. There's no doubt about that. And I really like that emphasis on the two-wayness of that experience and that situation. It's like, we want to create an environment where you enjoy coming in or logging on or being part of this, but it goes beyond that. And actually, the cultural experience isn't just about the nice stuff that helps us feel more comfortable where we are that day.
Yeah. I often summarize it down for clients to the feel and the flow. So does work feel good, but does the work also flow well? So that's what great cultures do. They do both pieces. I think sometimes when I say don't focus on engagement, clients of ours panic because they think that they've accidentally, hired in some mercenary management consultant. That piece is important, but it is a byproduct of creating an environment where we enable people to do good work and to feel proud and supported to succeed. That comes if we prime the environment for the right behaviours to succeed and create the right expectations. If we just chase that, we can create really happy, cosy contexts where nobody is showing up in the way that the business needs.
Yeah, and I think where it's too comfortable, and I don't mean about making it really uncomfortable for people, but where things have got too comfortable, then everybody gets sucked in sometimes to that. Well, we can't ask people to do even the basics sometimes because we've made it too comfortable. Is that a bit unfair? Have I gone too far there?
No, I absolutely agree. I think it suppresses people's ability to take personal responsibility. It suppresses their ability to get experiences, to develop. It suppresses that comfort around stretch, which actually every human needs to ultimately feel valuable and like it's evolving. So while it can feel kind of nice on the surface level, often what we find is in those really comfortable or cozy contexts is that everybody's friendly, but relationships aren't very good because you haven't had the constructive conflict and feedback that you need. People are too scared to try anything else, but they feel frustrated that they're not trusted or they feel stagnant. So, it's nice to create something nice, but it's not necessarily healthy. I often use the analogy of, how you feel when you have a day binging Netflix and eating unhealthy foods. It's kind of like that, where it feels lovely in the moment, doesn't it? But your body doesn't thank you for it afterwards. It's not
very good for you.
Well, I say that as a parent of 2 young kids, I'd take the after effects at the moment because there's not a chance of that happening in my life. But but yeah, I think it's that piece. It feels nice in the moment, but it's not necessarily, it's not functional and healthy longer term.
Yeah, and the impact of it doesn't help anybody, isn't it? I mean, you're the specialist in this area, so I'd love to hear what you think about this. But we're not really designed for just having a comfortable environment, are we? We're designed to strive and to evolve and to grow and to succeed, aren't we? There's something quite interesting in that in terms of actually it's really good for people to have high expectations of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes I think even the world where performance is aligned can be perfectly comfortable because we set the conditions up to, I'm going to say, make it easy. I think that can be a bit of a triggering word. I don't
Yeah,
mean that. I think give everybody what they need in order to
yeah.
succeed. So I
Less
think,
friction.
yeah, exactly that. I think exactly that, kind of taking the drag away, making it easier to show up and do what you need to do, for sure. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be about high growth, high ambition, everybody trying brand new things. It's just about expecting people, the deal being that we're not just in service to your comfort. We will support you we'll create a good environment that allows you to allow this business to succeed. And basically the psychological contract being focused on business needs and priorities from a colleague point of view, and the business priorities being about enablement of our people to allow them to show up and deliver those things. And I suppose for HR leaders, it can feel tricky to start to push that, and it feels scary, particularly if you're in the cozy place and you're the person who's going to have to deal with the lifting grievances when the rules start to shift. But I think what that shift in mindset allows us to do is fundamentally have a different conversation with our exec team about why we need to do this. We're not just saying it's because people are sad or grumpy or they're mad that you don't spend enough time with them and all that stuff that just triggers our execs and shuts them down. It allows us to have a different conversation, but it also massively broadens our playbook from what's the 10 things that I can do to make it feel nicer around here that I've done 97 times before and nobody
Yeah,
appreciates, to what is the plethora of things that we can do to prime this environment for success and enable our people to succeed. So it allows us to start to have much more of a conversation about how we do things around here as a whole business, rather than how do we as an HR function buffer the unhelpful ways that we do
yeah.
things around here and try and protect experience in what is fundamentally not a particularly healthy or helpful or enabling context. So for me, I think the reason we developed this approach was about broadening that conversation, and my really targeted focus on how do we get the execs in on influencing and thinking about how they run the business and get culture out of HR, where we can absolutely influence the backbone of people processes, but we're playing at the edges of how the business is run because that's not our remit to manage.
No, and I think that's such an important point, and I think we all know that as HR professionals, really, isn't it? The culture and business performance doesn't sit with HR; it sits well beyond that, and that probably ties into a barrier for success sometimes, doesn't it? In terms of that, so if if the exec engagement with what we're doing is a barrier, what else are you seeing in that space that makes what you're talking about difficult?
It's a really good question. I think that there are a lot of challenges inherent in our environment, but I think also inherent in the way that we approach culture that influence whether we're going to successfully be able to harness it. So I think one of the big ones for me is about definition of what good culture looks like. So I think a lot of businesses come to us saying we want a good culture, but when you ask them what that means, again, we default back to this piece around we want people to be happy around here. And actually that is important, but there's a much clearer nuance that we can use. So if we're looking at culture through this lens of activating the performance and the behaviour that we need, starting the conversation there in terms of who are we? What is it that we're actually trying to achieve this year? But importantly, what's the context that we're trying to achieve that in? So I think a lot of the time we build our values based on our mission and we're saying we want to do this. So our values to do that are X, Y, and Z. The bit of the conversation that we often miss is what's the context that we're operating within. So as we're achieving that mission, are we trying to build a business from the ground up? Are we inventing the products as we go? Are we working in a market that's crowded with other competitors, so we need to differentiate ourselves on quality? Or are we regulated so tightly that we can never make a single mistake around this? Understanding that context and the priorities of how we need to deliver on those goals and what it will take to get there and what good looks like around that allows us then to be much clearer about, well, how do we need people to show up? And therefore, what sort of culture do we need to create in order to enable people to show up in that way, to make that behaviour and that mode of operation natural? So clarity around what good looks like, I think, is a massive challenge. And the other one I would call out, there's about 47 of them, but I'll just do I'll just do two. The other one I think is about psychological contract. So I think we often get ourselves caught in a really sticky and unbalanced deal with our people that's just outmoded. So we make a deal with someone when we recruit them, in how we attract them and what we promise them and how we treat them in that first while. We continually reinforce that, particularly whenever we're pushing the employee experience agenda from a culture point of view. We continue telling them, you're important, you're the most important thing, or whatever it may be. But if our operating context changes or our goals change, the deal starts to shift. And often where most businesses get caught is they're asking one thing from people, but they believe the deal is something else. And so everything that we ask them to do feels unfair, feels unreasonable. We get reaction and resistance to it. So if we get those two base things right, absolute clarity on who we are and how we need to show up to deliver the things that we need to. And then what does that mean in terms of the deal that we need to have with our people around what we expect them to give and what they're going to get in return to make that possible. If we keep that current and those two things current and really work on them, then actually everything else follows.
So what I was hearing there was we've got those key issues of leadership engagement. Are they really driving what's going on? Are we thinking about the context that we're operating in? And then are we changing things and doing that in an active way as things change, rather than just leaving people feeling like there's an expectation of a certain thing when actually other people in the business have moved on elsewhere and need something else, and we've actually not had an active conversation around that?
I think it's absolutely that. It's stopping seeing culture as something that we audit and fix, and it's getting to that point of real conscious cultivation. So having the continual conversations about, is this thing still fit for purpose? And that this real conscious recognition that our people don't behave in the way that they do because of most of their behaviour isn't because of who they are or what they've learned or what skills or training we give them. It's about the environment that we drop them into. So we've just done a lovely bit of research on our kind of the driver model that we use. And we find that predicts about 62% of the variance in behaviour of people in the cultures that we're influencing. And so what I mean by that is we measure the operating environment that people are working within and how that nudges and primes their behaviour. So everything from how clear the strategic plan is and how aligned that is to your resourcing model, to how our leaders' behaviour, not just role models, but also enables people to act in the way that you want them to, and how regularly our managers remove some of that friction and influence that. So lots of different, there's a shed load of different factors in there that we look at, but it influences 62% of observed behaviour. And so I think there's a load of stuff that I don't have to take you into the history of it. I was about to launch into one there, but I think the rise of personality profiles in particular, and just how our brains work as humans, we're designed to default to the idea that how somebody behaves is about their personal characteristics, but a huge amount of it is actually about the environment that they're operating within, their response to that, and their willingness to their desire to be accepted in the tribe that they're operating within. So we've got to really understand, is that context that we're creating fit for purpose, and actively influence that over time.
We get what we deserve, really, don't we, a little bit? And I think there are always, obviously, the bad apples that kind of are toxic, whatever you do. However, for the grand majority, we actually have a significant amount of control over the experience that they have in a way that is about how they perform.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that's spot on observation on it. There's a lovely little phenomenon called fundamental attribution bias that is at play for all of us. And it's the idea that as human beings, when we behave in a certain way, we explain that by context. But when we see other people behaving in a certain way, we assume that it's about that personal characteristic. And that absolutely creates lines of war, of traction, of friction, whatever you want to call it, where everybody is pointing at everyone else going, well, if they just didn't act like that, if they did this, then it would be better. But the gift of culture is around what you really need to do. I guess that the magic bean is around getting everybody to notice what they need to do differently to influence that different experience, which is why this piece around deal making and being really clear around how we all need to be to make this thing succeed and how we all play a role in making this feeling flow better, that is the thing that allows it to shift. If so much culture work is listening to colleagues and them saying these are the 952 things that leaders need to do different, and then that being taken into the boardroom and leaders getting naturally defensive and frustrated because they're probably working their socks off, maybe not in quite the right places, but it's being misinterpreted, and so in return they go, well, if they just did this would happen. You've got to break down those lines and get everybody to move, stop focusing on everybody else, focus on what you can do, and that's when culture starts to shift.
Awesome. I love that. What do you think are the key things, therefore, that an HR leader who's been tasked with, we need to fix our culture, sort that out, please, Mr. or Mrs. HR person, where do you think they should start?
So I think starting with that conversation around what are we trying to do around here? What's the context that we're operating within? So I always say, go and have that conversation with your exec. The first thing you need to do is shift in their mind what culture is. And the best way to do that is have that conversation around what is it we're trying to achieve, but talk to me about where the risks and opportunities are and really how our people need to show up to allow us to deliver what we need to deliver in the next couple of years. And in having that conversation, you can start to couch any work that you do around culture, exploration, action planning on these couple of things that we really need to target and we need to make happen from a behavioural point of view in order to achieve those goals. So just shift the conversation. Stop having the conversation about who's well, who's not, who's happy, who isn't. Just bench that conversation for a bit, because all it does is it triggers the defensiveness or the overwhelm of our executives, and have the conversation which they're having, which is how the hell do we actually deliver on these goals that we have given all of these challenges that we're facing. Start there, and that will allow you to shift focus and emphasis in the room around culture really quickly.
And that's the way you suck them into the conversation, isn't it? You can put the other bits in afterwards, i.e., do you know what? Flexible working really helps us to achieve these things as well. Whereas if you start with a conversation about flexible working, there's a good chance you've got them back in the box already.
Yeah. And I think what I kind of, for me, the conversation has two steps: the performance piece, and then the next step is, so what type of talent do we need in order to achieve that thing? And when we're having a conversation around talent and resources, rather than how we're making Barbara on reception feel a bit better because she doesn't feel like you said hello to her yesterday or whatever it may be, we're getting into that place of acknowledging our executives as human beings themselves who've got a big job and a big set of priorities, and we are anchoring the priority that we have in their top 3 to 5, which is how do we deliver these numbers? How do we deliver this performance? So if we want it to fit into that priority list of what they can actually pay attention to, we've got to frame it in a way that fits with what's relevant to them.
That's wonderful. Is there anything else I've not asked you about that would be useful to share?
I think it's an interesting question. I think the piece about understanding what type of cultural mode that you need, that's probably a helpful thing to understand a little bit more. But what I won't do today is give you 47 different versions of what that would look like. I think it might explode explode people's headphones. But we do have a lovely research paper that we've identified the kind of 5 different, the most common performance modes that we see for different organisations. So I can share that with you, Anwen, and if people want to kind of get that off the show notes and things, they can do. But I would say that gives some really good advice about what different types of modes most typically, there'll probably be one in there that you identify with or feels like a close approximation, and it gives you some tips on how to start the conversation with your exec around that. So I would say if you're going anywhere with this stuff, reframe culture to performance, and that's the place to start, because it will give you the insight and information that you need to start to look at your broader culture work with a different lens.
Fantastic. So last question for you. What do you think is the one thing that would help HR leaders bring their HR strategy to life in the most effective way?
I've probably done a big finish a bit early, haven't I? I think this piece around framing culture as a driver for performance is the critical bit. You know, if we absolutely remove in the executive conversations anyway, and further down as we talk to our team, if we can stopping an experience and start to talk about, well, how does that experience, what people are seeing, what they're feeling, the signals that they're getting are influencing their attitudes and behaviour at work, and then how that is influencing ultimate performance. So finish the cultural equation. That's a game changer. I've certainly found it a game changer in my own practice as a culture consultant. We get so much more traction, so much more progress in framing it from a performance point of view. And I'm not sitting here saying I was perfect from the first day that I stepped into a boardroom on this. You know, I've spent plenty of my life doing the should do's and coming out going, why am I the only person who's speaking English and everybody's looking at me like I'm speaking French? I realised actually I was speaking a different language to the people in the boardroom. And as soon as I've started to talk about the same stuff with the same priorities, but in their language, the difference has been huge, absolutely huge.
I love that. And I think that emphasis on language and how we're showing up to conversations as HR leaders is really important. Like, yes, of course, the well-being of our people is incredibly important, and the experience they have, and we want people to shout about what it's like to work in our organizations. But ultimately, we need our organizations to succeed. And that isn't just about people being happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find out more about you?
I'm always kicking about LinkedIn, let's be honest. I seem to spend half of my life. Well, I say that. I like talking on there. So come and find me on LinkedIn. You'll find lots of stuff on there. And you'll find links to things like our YouTube channel that's got lots of intro webinars about this stuff. But also our website is theexproject.com. And if you don't see the report in the show notes, go and have a dig in our free resources, because you'll find loads of stuff there, including that.
Fantastic. Paula, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this episode of HR Strategy in the Hot Seats. Please leave us a review. Let us know what you think about this episode. What did you think about the topic? If you have any thoughts on topics, themes, questions, guests you'd like me to cover in future episodes, please do let me know. Get in touch with me via LinkedIn or drop me an email at anwen@purpleskyconsulting.co.uk. Hope that you could join us on the next episode, and make sure you share this with any of your network too. Thank you.